guys, it's Elise. Welcome back to My Cupcake Addiction. Today we're going to be making a giant Rolo. I don't know about you guys, but I haven't been able to find Rolos in stores for a little while, so I'm not sure if they've been discontinued or what's going on. So I decided to take matters into my own hands, make my own Rolos at home, but because this is My Cupcake Addiction, we're going to make it giant size. This thing weighs 3 kilos or 6 pounds. It is way over the top and it is absolutely delicious. The things that you're going to need to make your gigantic, huge Rolo, you're going to need some whipping cream. You're also going to need a little bit of unsalted butter, a little bit of sugar, so caster sugar. I've got a fair amount of melted milk chocolate, and I've also got a little bit of unmelted milk chocolate and some unmelted white chocolate. I've got some vanilla essence, a little bit of glucose, and you can also use something like light corn syrup if you don't have access to glucose, or even honey, which will make your caramel a tiny bit sweeter. I've also got a little bit of water. We're going to be using heat today, so you're also going to need a couple of saucepans. I'm using these little plastic IKEA bowls. So this is a set of bowls that I got from IKEA in Australia. If you guys can't find these, I will leave dimensions for these bowls. We're looking for a nice plastic bowl because it's going to be a little bit flexible for us to be able to pop out our little Rolo pieces. I've got 6 of those. I've also got a baking tray lined with some baking paper and a couple of metal bowls. And I'm going to be showing you how to wrap your Rolo, but I'll get to the things you need for that later on in the video. So the first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to make my little kind of outer shells for each of my Rolo pieces. I'm using milk chocolate today because that's the Rolo way to do it, but if you prefer dark or white, you can customize this Rolo for the person that you're making it for. I'm going to pour some of my melted milk chocolate and a little bit more than I think I'm going to need into my bowl, making a massive mess along the way. And then I'm just going to use the spoon. I'm going to tap it on the bench. And then just use a spoon to bring that chocolate right up around those edges all the way to the lip. So you really want to make sure that's going to the very, very top lip of the bowl. Nice and thick up around the sides. I'm only going to do 1 layer here, not a double layer. So you do want to make sure it's relatively thick, but it starts to be thin enough that they'll be able to crack through it to find their caramel inside. Perfect. Once I'm happy that I've got a nice sort of a neat coat, I'm actually going to tip just a little bit of that out so that it's not too crazy thick in any spots. And so I don't use too much chocolate because there's a fair bit of chocolate in this recipe. If you're looking for all of your quantities and conversions and measurements, I'm going to leave them on the MyCupcakeAddiction.com website so you can print that recipe out and you'll have access to everything you need to make your delicious giant Rolos. Perfect. Now I'm going to run my finger around the top because I want that to be really, really nice and flat, and you definitely don't want any of that chocolate going around the outside edges. You kind of want to make sure that you can see the outside edge of the bowl. Into the fridge it goes. So now you're just going to repeat that with all 6 of your bowls, and I'd actually recommend probably making 8 of these because I found they were pretty easy to get out, but I did have 1 or 2 that cracked along the way. Now before you're finished with your melted milk chocolate, I'm just going to take about a tablespoon or roughly a tablespoon, and I'm going to drizzle it down onto my baking paper. This is going to make a little disc that we're going to need to help to close our Rolos. So I'm just going to use the back of the spoon, and you want it to be just ever so slightly smaller than the circumference of the top of one of your bowls. Check the circumference. Looks pretty good to me. Perfect. So those ones, you're going to need 6 of those to go with your other 6 bowls. That can go off into the fridge to set. So I've got both of my pots heating up to their maximum temperature. In one pot, which is my larger saucepan, I've combined my water, my sugar, and my glucose. And in the other one, I've just got my cream. So I'm just going to boil the cream, and as soon as it starts to boil, get it off because it boils over really quickly. In this pot here, we're going to be making a really easy caramel, and I want it to be a little thicker than a normal caramel because I don't want it to just run everywhere. I kind of want people to be able to bite into their Rolo pieces. I wanted to make this as simple as possible so you guys won't need a candy thermometer, but you will need to watch very, very carefully. For my caramel portion, I've got a pastry brush, and as that even starts to heat up, I'm just going to brush down the outside edges with a little bit of water, and this is just going to stop any sugar sticking to the outside sides of the bowl. I'm going to very, very quickly, with a wooden spoon, just give a very light stir, but I don't want to stir that too much once that caramel starts heating up. So while it's still in its cool state, it's okay to give it a little bit of a stir through, but if you stir it too much once it starts to heat, you're going to end up with grainy caramel. Waiting for sugar to start boiling can feel like it takes forever, but once it starts to turn color, it changes very, very quickly. So while it feels like you might be able to walk away and leave it, absolutely do not, or you're going to end up with burnt caramel and it's going to taste really bitter, which we don't want inside our Rolos. I've got some bubbles just starting to form in my pan, and so that I'm still kind of stirring it without actually stirring it, I'm just going to swoosh it a really little bit, just very, very gently, just to distribute the heat as evenly as possible so that I don't burn the caramel on the outside and not have it hot enough through the middle, just while everything heats up. My cream I'm watching because that's a sneaky one. It will go from not boiling to overboiling so incredibly quickly. Once my caramel starts boiling, I'm going to let that boil for 5 to 6 minutes. So you can set an alarm if you want, but you want to watch this like a hawk because it will start to change color, and as it changes color, that's when you're going to know it's time to pull it off. So you can see I've got a really nice bubble going on in my sugar mixture there, but it's still clear. So this is where we just watch it, and as it starts to turn color, we pull it off almost immediately, but I'll show you the different color stages. So at 2 minutes, your mixture should still be clear and it should have a really, really nice little rolling, bubbling boil going. At 3 minutes, we're still clear, so it doesn't look like anything's happening, but like I said, watch this sucker. My cream's just started to boil, so as soon as you see those bubbles, get it off the heat and pop it over onto something where it's not going to burn the bench. At 4 minutes, it's still clear, but you can see it's starting ever so slightly to take on a little bit of an amberish hue, and you'll notice it starts to smell quite sweet and delicious. At 5 minutes, we're still boiling. It's still relatively clear, but it's starting to thicken up. So you'll see that it's sort of reduced in size and it's getting thicker and thicker, those little bubbles. Once it thickens and those bubbles start to slow down a little bit, this is where the color change starts. It's always the most nerve-wracking part. At 6 minutes, we're still bubbling and boiling away. The color change is gonna happen any minute. While we're waiting for that, you can add your vanilla very quickly into your hot cream and just stir it through. It doesn't really matter when you do that, but after the cream is boiled is best so that it doesn't change the taste of the vanilla. So I'm at 7 minutes and you can start to see that color change happening. The amount of minutes is going to depend on the heat that you've got in your stove. I know on my induction, it only takes about 6. On this one, it's going to be a little bit closer to 8. So really you're going by color. You can see even as I'm speaking, it's getting more and more golden. Those bubbles have slowed right down. They're still definitely bubbling away. I've got a beautiful honey yellow color happening at the moment, so I'm gonna let it get a little bit deeper. You sort of want the color of a light cup of tea. At 7 minutes and 20 seconds, still honey, but it is definitely deepening. And you'll notice I haven't been stirring it at all, and I also stopped wiping down the outside edges once that sauce started to thicken. Once it starts to thicken, the water's actually gonna cause it to splatter. So you only wanna wipe down around the outside edges with your pastry brush while it's reducing, about the first 4 minutes. We're so close. It's getting more and more golden. Still not quite where I want it. I'm gonna give mine a very, very quick swoosh just because even looking at it, I can see it's slightly more golden around the outside edges, and I wanna make sure that it's coloring as evenly as possible. You wanna get it to just that beautiful, kind of like a light cup of tea or an iced tea sort of a color. As soon as it's at that color, take it off the heat, and we're going to pour in the cream. Now the reason this cream's hot is because otherwise it would bubble and splatter everywhere. I'll give it a quick stir just to make sure I don't have any of those little skim bits of fat on top, and then in it goes. Little bit at a time because it is going to bubble up, kind of like a bit of a science experiment. Stirring it around as I add it to make sure that sugar doesn't crystallize. Make sure that I've got no lumps. It smells incredible. So while your caramel's still nice and hot, but it's stopped bubbling and broiling, you can add in your butter. Be really careful it doesn't splash up and hit you there. And then you just want to stir that until that butter's completely melted. I like to keep the butter cool because it helps to cool down the caramel a little bit faster. And so that we're not waiting all day for this caramel to cool down, I've actually put some ice and some water into a metal container. And I've got another metal bowl. I'm going to use that as a bit of an ice bath, and it's going to cool our caramel down in about 1/8 of the time. So once that butter's all stirred through, I'm going to let it cool down a little bit, and then we're going to add in our chocolates, which as they set back up, are going to help to give our caramel a little bit of additional thickness and a little bit more sweetness. With the chocolate you're using, you want to make sure you're using a compound chocolate. So that's chocolate that doesn't contain the ingredient cocoa butter. If you're in the US, melts are probably better for your milk chocolate, but most white chocolate should be fine to use from the supermarket. My butter's completely dissolved, so I'm going to pour that into my metal bowl. And I'm using metal just because it will conduct the cool a little bit better, but it will also conduct the heat, so make sure that you don't now grab it by the base, which is still going to be incredibly hot. I'm just going to carefully pick it up by the very, very top and rest it into my ice bath. Whenever you're using an ice bath, you want to make sure that the caramel on the bottom doesn't get really hard and the stuff on the top's not quite cool yet. So you just stir it around, not continuously, just intermittently as it cools. And I'm going to give that about 3 minutes over the ice bath before I add the chocolate. This is super hot and I don't want to burn the chocolate as I add it because that's going to cause the chocolate to kind of get a little bit grainy and it's going to make the texture of your caramel not as smooth and creamy as we'd like. Okay, so my 3 minutes is up and I'm going to pour in that white and milk chocolate. For a lighter caramel, you could use all white, but I didn't want mine to be too sweet and white chocolate can sometimes be overly sweet, so I wanted to balance it out with the milk. I'm just going to stir that around still over that ice bath until that chocolate's completely melted. And you'll see that instantly start to thicken up, both as the chocolate melts and as the caramel starts to cool a little bit. With most caramels, they will thicken up quite a bit on cooling. So it's sort of tough because you know what consistency you want to achieve, but you can't see it until well after you've actually finished making the caramel. With the caramel now done, all you need to do is let it sit over that ice bath, stir it every couple of minutes just to keep it moving, and we'll move on to getting our little Rolo shells out of our little bowl molds. Now it's time to start putting everything together. So I've got my little set discs from the fridge. I've also got my little set molds, and the easiest way to get these out is when they're really cold. So you can pull them out one at a time and pop them out one at a time. And I've also got my caramel, which is cool to touch. It's not at all warm. A little bit more melted chocolate is going to help us seal them up. So to take my little molds out of the bowls, I found the best way to do it was to turn them upside down and just apply a very small amount of pressure with the heel of my hand gently on the base. It'll actually, and you can almost see it coming away from the little bowl there, it'll actually cause the suction to sort of break inside that bowl, and then you should just be able to pull it straight out. Perfect, just like that. I love these bowls because they even give you those little ridges that go around the top, kind of just like a regular Rolo. Now that I know that's been released, I'm going to place it back in the bowl and avoid touching the outsides of your chocolate shells as much as you can. If you do need to touch them, grab a tissue and use the tissue to touch them so that you're not leaving oily fingerprints all over there. As I lift up my caramel, I don't want any water going into my chocolate or into my caramel, so I'm just going to make sure that the water from the water bath hasn't stuck around on the bottom of my bowl by wiping it off. And then I'm just going to fill my little Rolo mold, not all the way to the top. Perfect. I've left just under 1 centimeter between the top of my actual bowl and where I'm filling my caramel to. Once your caramel's in, you want to take one of your little inner discs, and you can trim it down just using a knife if you need to, but you want it to fit quite snugly inside your little Rolo container, just sitting on top of that caramel. In she goes. Perfect. Now that's really just to hold the other chocolate and make sure that we're not spilling caramel everywhere. So I'm going to take some more melted chocolate now, and I'm going to scoop it, and I'm going to make sure that's really, really nice and flush on top. You can see as it hits that little disc, it's stopping all of that caramel from getting too much weight in any one section and oozing out. You want to make sure that you're trapping the caramel inside, and you do want the base to be quite thick, because once we actually wrap this, there's going to be a fair amount of pressure on the bases, particularly of our Rolos. Coming all the way out to the edges. I don't want to see any caramel poking over those edges. And then you can use something like an offset spatula, or I'm just going to use a scraper, and you just want to run along the top. Starting at the inside and coming out. This is where it gets kind of a little bit messy. And again on the other side. Perfect. Once again, you want to just take your finger around the outside edge just to smooth off any edges. Give it a little tap. And off into the fridge to set. That is our first 1 pound Rolo piece ready to go. Now we need 5 more. We're almost done, and there is no reason why you can't just serve those on dessert plates with some ice cream as individual pieces of Rolo. To take them out, they really should just pop straight out. So that there is a solid pound or 500 grams of a piece of Rolo. It is full of caramel and it is unbelievably indulgent. We have our 6 of them all ready to go. So I'm just going to lay them out, and I'm going to show you how to cover them so they actually look like a giant roll of Rolo, because let's face it, most of us are probably going to be sharing this with someone else, and how fun to grab them out of their very own massive Rolo containers. To make your Rolo wrapper, you're going to need a large piece of metallic gold cardboard. This one's about a 250 GSM, just a craft cardboard, and it's white on one side and gold on the other. You're also going to need some baking paper. I've got a ruler and a measuring tape, or 2 rulers will do. I've got a little bit of non-toxic, just craft glue, some sticky tape, some scissors, and I've got a pen. And I'm also going to use my cleaned out bowls so that I can do a little bit of measuring before I actually go and start sticking our Rolo pieces in there. Let's get crafting. So to make your giant Rolo wrapper, you're going to need all of your little bowls kind of stacked on top of one another. And then you want to take a measuring tape and just measure up. I used a ruler flat on top to make sure that I get an accurate measurement. Then you want to measure your piece of card so that you're getting just the right measurement. You really want this to be as close to the size of your Rolos as possible and not too much bigger. Once you've done that, you'll have a little bit of excess of the gold cardboard. So you want to take your bowl again and you want to trace around it so that you've got an end that's the same size as your Rolo pieces. I just added a couple of little tabs, and in hindsight, the more of these little tabs that you have, actually the neater finish you'll have on the inside of your Rolo packet. I just did 5 or 6 around the outside, cut around my circles, and then just split the tabs in 2, so they were kind of like 2 little flaps. I folded them up. Now you want to take a little bit of glue and you want to attach just the first portion of your baking paper, mainly in the center, to the inside of your cardboard. This is so that your chocolate's not actually touching any of that cardboard. Once you've got that in, you can just fold over sort of an inch on either side And then you want to start affixing with some sticky tape, and use a fair bit of sticky tape here because these are the only things keeping your Rolos in place. So you want them to be nice and strong. I attached just one tab at a time on either side until I got all the way down to the last tab and almost had like a little cocoon for my giant Rolo pieces to sit inside. Once you're happy with that, use a little bit more glue just to affix your baking paper all the way down. And then you want to take your Rolos, I'm just using a tissue to handle them again, and gently stack them. I stack them on top of each other, and then you want to roll them over relatively quickly, and you'll notice they're very much the same size with just a tiny bit of room left over inside that Rolo packet. Roll it all the way around as tight as you can. You really want to keep these Rolo pieces in position so they don't move around too much. And then I affixed a couple of small pieces of sticky tape just to hold it, and then a longer piece of sticky tape, but I made sure that longer piece didn't go all the way to the ends. I printed out some Rolo logos on a bit of sticky paper or a big label piece, but you can just use regular paper, and then just stick it down so that you've got about 3/4 of an inch either side of that gold hanging out, just like with a regular Rolo. So that's it. That's how you make your amazing 6-pound or 3-kilo gigantic Rolo. A big thanks to everyone on Instagram that suggested that I make this. I absolutely love hearing your suggestions of what you guys want to see me make, whether it's on my Instagram, on my Facebook, via Twitter, or down below in the comments. This is a channel for you guys, and I always love to make stuff that I know you guys are going to love to see. If you're not already subscribed to the channel, make sure you do for more giant candy bars and 2 new videos every week. And as always, guys, thanks very much for watching.